The small town of Ashbrook, Oregon, had almost disappeared from modern maps. Once it had been a lively community where families gathered every weekend, children played in the streets until sunset, and the smell of fresh bread drifted through every neighborhood each morning. But as the years passed, businesses closed, people moved away, and silence slowly consumed the town. Among all the abandoned buildings, one place stood above the rest in local legends: Rose and Lily Bakery. The old brick building stood at the corner of Willow Street, its faded sign barely hanging onto rusted chains. Broken windows stared into the empty streets like lifeless eyes. Thick vines climbed the walls, wrapping themselves around the cracked bricks as if nature itself wanted to hide whatever remained inside. The townspeople avoided even looking at it. Some claimed they could smell warm cinnamon bread coming from the building long after midnight. Others swore they'd seen a little girl standing in the second-floor window, smiling at passing cars before disappearing into darkness. No one had entered the bakery in over 30 years. At least, no one who was willing to talk about it. Jekar Visson had spent nearly a decade exploring abandoned places across America: old hospitals, forgotten schools, collapsed prisons, haunted hotels. His YouTube channel had grown popular because he never exaggerated stories. If a place wasn't haunted, he admitted it. If strange things happened, he let the camera decide. His viewers trusted him. When an anonymous email arrived with only one sentence: "If you're looking for a place that remembers every death, visit Rose and Lily Bakery in Ashbrook," Jekar couldn't ignore it. 2 days later, he found himself driving through endless pine forests beneath a gray Oregon sky. Rain tapped softly against his windshield as GPS struggled to recognize the nearly forgotten roads. Eventually, a weathered wooden sign appeared: "Welcome to Ashbrook." Half the letters had fallen away. The town felt frozen in time. Old diners stood empty. Gas stations were boarded shut. Even the streets looked abandoned. The only place still open was a tiny convenience store beside the old church. Jekar stopped to buy bottled water before exploring. Inside, an elderly man quietly watched him from behind the counter. The man looked at the camera hanging around Jekar's neck. "You here for the bakery?" Jekar smiled. "That obvious." The old man didn't smile back. "No one's asked about that place in years." Jekar leaned against the counter. "So, what's the story?" The old man remained silent for several seconds before speaking. 30 years ago, a mother and her daughter disappeared there. Disappeared. They said it was a robbery. What do you think? The old man's eyes slowly shifted toward the rain-covered window. "I think the bakery never let them leave." A cold silence filled the store. Jekar waited for the man to laugh. He never did. Instead, he quietly added, "If you smell fresh bread after sunset, don't stay." An hour later, Jekar stood outside Rose and Lily Bakery. The building looked even larger than the photographs online. Its massive wooden doors had rotted almost completely away. Rust covered every metal hinge. A faded display window still held broken cake stands covered in decades of dust. He switched on his camera. "Today we're exploring one of Oregon's most infamous abandoned buildings." His voice echoed strangely. There wasn't a single bird singing nearby. Not even the wind seemed willing to touch the place. Taking a deep breath, he stepped inside. Dust floated through beams of fading sunlight. Shelves leaned sideways. Rusted baking trays covered the floor. Ancient ovens stood silently against the walls like sleeping giants. Everything smelled old: rotten wood, mold, wet concrete, nothing unusual. Jekar slowly explored the main kitchen. He found old rolling pins, broken mixing bowls, burned recipe books. One calendar still hung beside the office door. October 1995, it had never been turned again. He filmed every detail carefully. Then something caught his attention. A family photograph hung crookedly above the cash register. He brushed away decades of dust. A smiling woman wearing a flower-covered apron stood beside a little girl holding a birthday cake. Written beneath the picture, Emily, Carter, Sophie. Carter. Mother and daughter, Jekar whispered, before he could continue. A heavy sound echoed from upstairs. He froze. The building became completely silent again. Probably part of the roof collapsing, he told himself. Still, he aimed the flashlight toward the staircase. Nothing. Slowly, he climbed. Each wooden step groaned beneath his boots. The second floor had once been the family's living quarters, small bedrooms, a tiny kitchen. Children's drawings still decorated one hallway. One drawing showed Emily and Sophie baking together beneath a bright yellow sun. Another showed the bakery with strange black figures standing outside the front door. Jekar frowned. Children often drew strange things, when didn't they? He continued walking. Halfway down the hallway, he heard it. Soft, tiny footsteps, not behind him, ahead, like a child running barefoot across old wooden floors. He rushed forward. The hallway was empty. Every room stood abandoned. Halfway down the hallway, he heard it. Soft, tiny footsteps, not behind him, ahead, like a child running barefoot across old wooden floors. He rushed forward. The hallway was empty. Every room stood abandoned. He spun instantly. Empty hallway. Silence. His heartbeat raced. He searched every room again. Nothing. After nearly 20 minutes, he finally decided to head back downstairs. As he reached the entrance, a powerful smell suddenly filled the air. Fresh bread, warm butter, sweet cinnamon, exactly as if someone had just opened an oven. Jekar stopped, confused. The bakery had been abandoned for 3 decades. There was no electricity, no gas, no working ovens. Yet the smell became stronger with every second, almost inviting him deeper inside. He followed it toward the old kitchen. The largest oven stood directly ahead, cold, silent, covered in rust. Then, without warning, the oven door slowly creaked open by itself. Jekar's flashlight trembled. Inside, there was nothing, only darkness. He stepped closer. The smell became almost unbearable. Fresh bread, chocolate cake, vanilla, as if someone had been baking only moments ago. Suddenly, his camera screen flickered. For less than a second, a little girl wearing a white dress appeared standing beside the oven. She wasn't looking at Jekar. She was looking directly into the camera. The screen returned to normal. Jekar immediately turned toward the oven. No one was there. The room was empty. His breathing became heavier. He replayed the recording. The figure appeared again. Perfectly clear. A little girl. Long dark hair. Bare feet. Smiling. Then the recording ended with a strange whisper, barely audible. "Help. Mommy." Jekar slowly looked back toward the dark staircase leading to the basement. The whisper came again. This time, not from the camera, from below. "Help. Mommy." Jekar stood frozen at the top of the basement stairs. The whisper had been soft, almost impossible to hear. Yet it echoed through the abandoned bakery, as if someone had spoken directly into his ear. "Help, Mommy." His heart pounded against his chest. He glanced back toward the front entrance. The afternoon sunlight was fading, and dark storm clouds had swallowed most of the sky outside. Rain began tapping against the broken windows, filling the silence with an unsettling rhythm. For a brief moment, he considered leaving. Every instinct told him to walk away, but curiosity had always been stronger than fear. He tightened his grip on the flashlight, adjusted the camera strap to his chest, and slowly descended the wooden staircase. Each step groaned beneath his weight. The deeper he went, the colder the air became. By the time he reached the basement floor, his breath had become visible. "There shouldn't be this much cold in July," he whispered to the camera. His flashlight swept across the room. The basement was much larger than he had expected. Old flour sacks, now torn apart by time, were scattered everywhere. Rusted baking racks leaned against damp concrete walls. Broken crates and empty glass milk bottles covered the corners. Thick spider webs stretched from ceiling to floor, untouched for decades. Then, he noticed something strange. Tiny footprints, not dusty footprints. They were made of fresh white flour, small, barefoot, like those of a young child. They began only a few feet away from him and continued across the basement floor. Jekar slowly followed them. The footprints led toward the largest industrial oven in the building. Unlike the others, this oven looked different. It was cleaner, not new, but strangely untouched by decay. The metal door wasn't covered in rust. Someone, or something, had been touching it. As he approached, another sound echoed through the basement, soft humming, a lullaby, a woman's voice, gentle, beautiful, heartbreaking. The melody floated through the darkness without any clear direction. Jekar turned in circles trying to locate its source. Nothing. The humming stopped. Complete silence returned. He placed one hand on the oven door. It was warm. His eyes widened. Warm. That was impossible. There had been no electricity in the building for 30 years. Slowly, he pulled the heavy handle. The metal door opened with a long, painful creak. Inside, there was no fire, only darkness. But resting at the very back was a small, leather-bound notebook. Carefully, he reached inside and picked it up. The cover read, "Emily Carter's Journal." His pulse quickened. He sat against the wall and opened the first page. April 7th, 1995. Business has never been better. Sophie laughs every morning while helping me decorate cakes. She says one day she'll own this bakery. I hope she does. Jekar smiled faintly. The handwriting was elegant. The next several pages described ordinary life. Birthday cakes, wedding orders, friendly customers, school events, Emily's dreams for Sophie's future. It was peaceful, almost comforting. Then, the tone changed. May 19th. A man came again today. He offered to buy the bakery. I refused. He smiled, but there was something wrong with his eyes. June 2nd. Someone broke into the bakery last night. Nothing was stolen. Only every loaf of bread was left on the floor. Each one had a deep handprint pressed into the dough. June 18th. Sophie says she keeps seeing a man standing outside her bedroom window. When I look, no one is there. July 1st. The phone rings every night. No one speaks, only breathing. Jekar slowly lowered the journal. The atmosphere around him felt heavier with every page. He continued reading. August 10th. I finally told the sheriff. He searched the bakery. He found nothing. He thinks I'm imagining everything. August 24th. Tonight, Sophie woke me crying. She said someone was baking downstairs. When we checked, the ovens were still hot. At that exact moment, a metallic clang echoed somewhere behind him. Jekar turned instantly. One of the baking trays lying on the floor had flipped over by itself. No wind, no movement, nothing nearby. He slowly stood. Who's there? No answer, only silence. Then, the humming returned. Closer, this time. Much closer. It sounded like it was directly behind him. He spun around. No one. His flashlight suddenly flickered. Once, twice, then the beam went completely out. Darkness swallowed the basement. Only the tiny recording light on his camera remained visible. Jekar pulled a spare flashlight from his backpack. It wouldn't turn on, neither would his phone. Every electronic device had suddenly died. A cold breath brushed across the back of his neck. He froze. Someone was standing behind him. He could feel it. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head. Nothing, but on the dusty concrete floor, a fresh trail of flower footprints had appeared. This time, they circled him, as though a child had been walking around him in complete silence. His breathing became faster. Then, a tiny giggle echoed through the darkness, not evil, not mocking, lonely, heartbroken. Suddenly, every light came back. His flashlight burst to life. His phone restarted. The basement was empty again. But something had changed. Written across the concrete floor in fresh white flour were 4 words. "We are still here." Jekkar stared at the message in disbelief. His hands trembled. Someone had written it, while every light had been out. He quickly filmed the words. As he backed away, his foot struck something hidden beneath a broken wooden shelf. It was a small metal box, locked. The lock had long since rusted away. Inside were newspaper clippings tied together with faded red ribbon. The first headline read, "Local bakery owners missing." The second, "Police believe robbery gone wrong." The third, "Case closed after no evidence found." But one folded newspaper looked different. It wasn't an official article. Someone had circled one sentence in red ink. Several witnesses reported hearing screams around midnight, but no bodies were ever recovered. No bodies. Jekkar looked around the basement once more. Then his eyes slowly settled on the massive oven. His stomach tightened. If no bodies had ever been found, then where had Emily and Sophie gone? Before he could think further, a loud bang sound. The oven door slammed shut on its own with enough force to shake the room. Every light flickered again. From inside the sealed oven, someone knocked. 3 slow knocks. Then came a little girl's voice, soft, weak, almost crying. "Mommy, it's so dark." Jekkar instinctively stepped backward. The knocking stopped. A deep silence filled the basement. Then another voice answered from inside the oven. A woman's voice. Gentle. Broken. "I'm here, Sophie. I'm here." Jekkar realized with horror. The voices weren't trying to scare him. They were reliving their final moments. He stared at the oven as tears unknowingly filled his eyes. Whatever had happened in this bakery 30 years ago, the truth had never been buried. It had been trapped right beneath the oven. Jekkar stood motionless in front of the enormous industrial oven. The silence that followed the voices felt even more terrifying than the whispers themselves. His flashlight trembled in his hand. The words written across the floor, "We are still here," hadn't disappeared. Neither had the warmth radiating from the old oven. For several long seconds he couldn't move. Every instinct screamed at him to leave the basement and never return. But another thought kept echoing in his mind. If Emily and Sophie weren't trying to hurt him, then what were they trying to show him? He slowly stepped toward the oven once again. This time, instead of fear, he spoke softly. "I'm here. I'll listen." The basement became completely silent. Even the rain outside seemed to stop. Then, the oven door slowly opened by itself. No violent slam, no sudden movement, just a slow, deliberate creak. Inside, the darkness was gone. Instead, a faint golden light glowed from deep within. Jekkar leaned closer. The light grew brighter until it completely surrounded him. Suddenly, everything disappeared. When Jekkar opened his eyes again, the basement was gone. He was standing inside the bakery, but it wasn't abandoned anymore. The walls had fresh paint. The shelves were filled with warm bread. The ovens burned brightly. The air smelled of butter, cinnamon, vanilla, and fresh coffee. Outside the windows, people walked through Ashbrook's busy streets. Children laughed. Cars passed by. The town was alive. Jekkar looked down. His camera was still recording. The date displayed on its screen had changed. October 18th, 1995. He realized he wasn't dreaming. He wasn't seeing a memory. He was inside one. A voice behind him made him turn. A woman smiled warmly. She wore a flower-covered apron. "I'll have the birthday cake ready by 4. It was Emily. She walked right past him without noticing his presence. Moments later, a little girl ran downstairs holding a stuffed rabbit. "Mom! I finished my homework," Emily laughed. "Then you can help me decorate the cupcakes." Sophie smiled brightly. There was nothing frightening about them. They were simply a mother and her daughter. For nearly an hour, Jekar silently watched fragments of their lives unfold. Customers entered laughing. Emily greeted everyone by name. Sophie carefully placed cookies into paper bags. The bakery wasn't just a business, it was the heart of Ashbrook. Then, the front door opened. 3 men entered, unlike the friendly customers before them. These men never smiled. The tallest one wore a dark coat despite the warm afternoon. His eyes slowly scanned the bakery. Emily's smile faded. "We've made another offer." She calmly shook her head. "My answer hasn't changed. This bakery belongs to my family." The man leaned closer. "It won't for long." The 3 men walked out without buying anything. Emily watched them leave. Her hands were shaking. That night, the bakery closed as usual. Emily locked every door. Sophie brushed her teeth upstairs before going to bed. Outside, rain began to fall, exactly like the night Jekar had arrived. Midnight. A loud knock echoed through the building. Emily looked through the window. No one. Another knock. This time, from the back door. She slowly approached. Nothing. Then every light suddenly went out. Darkness covered the bakery. The sound of breaking glass shattered the silence. 3 shadowy figures forced their way inside. Emily grabbed Sophie and ran toward the basement. She wasn't hiding. She was protecting her daughter. The men followed. Jekar desperately tried to intervene. He shouted. He stepped between them, but no one could hear him. He was only witnessing the past. The men cornered Emily beside the industrial oven. "We gave you every chance." Emily refused to hand over the property documents. One of the men struck her. She collapsed. Sophie screamed and ran toward her mother. Another man grabbed the frightened child. Jekar closed his eyes. He couldn't stop what was happening. He could only watch. The leader looked at the old oven. No witnesses. The 3 men forced Emily and Sophie inside. Emily wrapped both arms around her daughter, holding her tightly, protecting her until the very last second. The heavy iron door slammed shut. From inside, Jekar heard Sophie crying. "Mommy, I'm scared." Emily held her close. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm right here." Outside, the men turned on the gas. The ancient burners roared to life. Jekar screamed, "No!" He pounded against the oven door. His fists passed straight through it. The flames grew stronger. The cries slowly faded. Then, silence. The men cleaned every trace of the crime. They removed blood, destroyed evidence, reported Emily and Sophie as missing. Without bodies, the investigation ended. Ashbrook slowly believed they had disappeared forever, but they never had. Their souls remained trapped inside the bakery, waiting for someone to uncover the truth. The memory around Jekar began to collapse. Walls cracked, the lights shattered, the warm bakery dissolved into darkness. He found himself back inside the abandoned basement. Tears streamed down his face. The oven door stood open. Inside sat 2 figures. Emily, holding Sophie exactly as she had 30 years ago. Neither looked burned, neither looked monstrous. They appeared peaceful, almost glowing. Emily looked directly at Jekar for the first time. "You finally know." Her voice was calm. Jekar nodded silently. "No one believed us." She gently stroked Sophie's hair. "We waited." So someone would. Jakar swallowed hard. I'll tell everyone. Emily smiled sadly. Truth doesn't erase pain, but it lets forgotten souls rest. Sophie slowly looked up. She still held the small stuffed rabbit from the memory. Will people remember us? Jakar's voice cracked. Yes, I promise. For the first time in 30 years. Emily smiled without sadness. The basement filled with a warm golden light. The cold disappeared. The smell of fresh bread returned. Not frightening, comforting. Mother and daughter slowly began to fade. Before disappearing completely, Emily whispered one final sentence. Thank you for coming home. The light vanished. The basement became empty. Only silence remained. Jakar looked inside the oven, resting at the back. Were two small skeletons wrapped together in a final embrace. Emily's arm still surrounded Sophie's tiny body. Exactly as he had seen in the vision, the missing evidence had been hidden there all along. Police arrived before sunrise. The investigation reopened after 3 decades. Forensic experts confirmed the remains belonged to Emily Carter and her daughter, Sophie. Old records were re-examined. The 3 businessmen responsible had all died years earlier. None of them had ever confessed. Ashbrook finally held a memorial for the mother and daughter the town had never been able to bury. Fresh flowers covered the steps of the old bakery. Children placed small teddy bears and loaves of bread beside their photographs. Jakar uploaded the entire investigation to his YouTube channel. Millions watched, millions cried. People from across America traveled to Ashbrook to leave flowers outside Rose and Lily Bakery. Months later, the building was carefully restored, not as a business, but as a memorial honoring Emily and Sophie. No one ever reported seeing frightening apparitions again. The whispers stopped. The footsteps disappeared. Even the mysterious smell of bread was gone. It seemed the spirits had finally found peace. But there was one detail Jakar never told anyone. On the night before the memorial opened, he watched the final unedited footage one last time. Everything appeared normal, until the last 5 seconds. As he walked out of the bakery that first night, the camera accidentally captured the second-floor window. Standing there, Emily and Sophie smiled warmly, not trapped, not afraid, simply watching. Then, Sophie gently waved. The video ended. Jakar never edited that scene. He never explained it. Because sometimes, the greatest horror isn't that ghosts exist. It's realizing that some spirits never wanted revenge. They only wanted the truth to be remembered.